So, hi Kaylee, how are you? I'm going to sort of preach a sermon and kind of have a conversation at the same time. And I believe this is going to work once again. Okay, so you guys know about the wise men, right? Which ones are those guys? Because we've just added 3 people and 3 camels. And I'll give you a hint, it's not the camels. This guy. Yep. And where are the other 2? They have fancy hats. Yep, there's one back there, and then there's one more right there at the front. So the wise men, we don't really know. We know there were 3 gifts. There might have been more than 3. There might have been, there could have been a dozen. We don't know. But they had 3 gifts, so we usually say that there were 3 of them. They weren't necessarily kings. We call them wise men. And it's difficult to know exactly how they'd fit, right? Like the wise men in the ancient world, we see them following a star. In that time, people that followed stars and looked at stars were like scientists. They were like mathematicians. They took the stars very seriously. They used to believe that the stars were alive because they moved. And they believed that the stars were eyes that were watching us all the time. And so when you have the constellations like Leo, that's actually a lion with eyes all over it. So if you read the book of Revelation, they describe these creatures that have eyes on the inside and the outside of their bodies. They're constellations. John in the book of Revelation was talking to the actual constellation creatures themselves, right? The bear and the lion and things. That's what people believed in the ancient world. Anyways, so they were modern scientists. And what the gospel's saying is that we learned about Jesus and the wonder of God, not just through the Bible and not just through the scriptures, but through ancient science, ancient knowledge, the knowledge of the stars and dreams. Remember at the very end, we hear about the dream, that God visits them in a dream. God visits these people not through the ancient Hebrew ways, but through ways that they can understand. And so one of the wonderful things about Epiphany is we can celebrate all the interesting ways and wonderful ways that God visits us that aren't necessarily through the church, through prayer, through all of the ways that we as Christians come together to celebrate. So that's what all these pictures are for. So if you guys can look at all the pictures, can you see them from down there? We tried to make it possible. I don't know how bright they are. Kaylee, do you see all the pictures? No, right behind you. They're changing all the time. There's a church thing. There's cats, dogs, lovely sunsets. That's the Milky Way, I think, in California when there was a power outage. That's a space shuttle launch that's seen from space, which is kind of cool. Whales. There's lots of really neat things. So what I tried to do is I was trying to inspire you guys, both you guys around here and all of you guys, to think about all the ways that God has visited you and inspired you that hasn't necessarily been through traditional churchy stuff. One of the big moments for me was a realization. I used to study classical music very seriously, and when I started going to seminary, I saw that a break. I was doing music things, and now I'm doing God things. And it took me until my 30s to realize that practicing French horn for me was actually a form of prayer. And a lot of my musical things I felt were very private and were none of people's business, which is confusing that it's music. You'd think of it as very public. But I thought of some of that stuff as very private because it was a way that God was able to speak to me that was very different than through words and through prayers. Nature is another example of something. Oh, there's the mathematics. There's an awesome looking cat. I don't know that cat, but I think he's fantastic. Nature and all of God's creatures seem to convey God's grace in a way that is mysterious and wonderful. I'm sure we live in Canada, so we're always kind of surrounded by wilderness. We have that amazing bog that's nearby that some of us visited earlier in the year. But animals always seem to convey a special kind of grace and holiness. For me, one of the powerful memories that came to mind as I was thinking about this was my childhood dog. She was a Siberian Husky, And when she was at the end of her life, she dug a hole for herself and got in it and prepared to die. And she had really bad arthritis, and so my dad would pick her up and carry her back into the house at the end of the day, and she'd sleep in my parents' room. And the next day, she'd go right back outside, down the stairs. We'd have to carry her down the stairs, and she'd go right back to her hole and get ready to die that day. And she did that every day until she died. And there was something profound that I learned about being prepared to die and about death through my dog. God can visit us and speak to us through profound ways that are unique to each of us. And so what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to do the same thing at the same time, is for all of us to take that piece of paper. You might not want to use it. You might want to close your eyes and think about some of the ways that God has reached you. A lot of us are tactile people when it comes to some of this stuff. If you want to draw a picture, if you want to write down some thoughts, I encourage you to do that. And we're going to take some time to think about some of the ways that God has visited you in your life that might not necessarily be particularly churchy or religious, but profound. So if you guys could do the same thing, I need you guys to draw a picture of one of the ways that God has reached you in your life. And Kaylee, what's a way that God has reached you in your life? Snowmen. God likes snow. What'd you guys end up doing? Kaylee drew a picture of herself. Actually, I hope you're going quick, but we're done now. You can keep working if you want. Kaylee drew a picture of herself lying in bed because God visited her in a dream. It's pretty powerful. I drew my dog, Chinook. She had blue eyes, but I only had a brown crayon. Does anybody else have any?
Color it over.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I think I'll do that. Does anybody in the adults section have the courage to reveal something that they've created? I would not be one of those people were I in your position. But I hope you did something, yeah. So,
my children.
Lovely. That's fantastic. Thanks. So you guys can keep them private if you want, or when you're done, we're going to be posting a bunch of these on some sort of internet portal of some sort. So if you want to broadcast it, you can. If you want to keep it to yourself, that totally is fine. Amen.